Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host. You should know by now. My name's John. And joining me today is returning guest Kate. We're talking about Disney again.
It's Disney again. It'll be Disney
Disney.
again.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
going to happen
actually
a lot. Brace yourselves.
glad because I had watched. We were just talking about the versions that we watched. I had watched the original theatrical version this morning, but then almost right after that, I turned on the audio commentary, which is for the special extended edition. So I got to enjoy Human again along with that. Yeah, so you were just, well, let's start off. I just want to say hi to everybody. Like,
Bonjour.
yeah, like I feel like I got a lot of people being enthusiastic about this week because surprise, surprise, I'm doing a movie that people have actually seen. So
About 200,760,000 times.
yeah, exactly. But oh my god, I'm just loving the number of people we're pulling at. In, in the Never Never podcast. Thank you so much for showing up. This is going to be a lot of fun. Um, yeah. Just hi everybody. Anyway, before I start tripping over my words, you said before we started that this is pretty much your favorite movie ever.
Yes.
So like, and like without doubt this is my favorite Disney movie ever, and it does rank as like one of my all-time favorites. How did you originally see the movie, and like why is this your favorite, Kate?
I'm as if my intel is correct, as far as I know, this was the first movie I ever sat down and watched. Uh, I would have been one or two, like just about to turn two, when I saw it, and I was told this much later in my life, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that tracks." So just pure nostalgia factor of, hey, this is the first movie that I remember showing you from my mom. So yeah, it's I don't obviously remember it, but I remember we had the VHS when I was a kid, and I would watch it all the time. So there's so many movies that I love, and there's so many movies I haven't seen that are great. And so sometimes it's just a nice fallback to be like, yeah, my favorite movie is Beauty and the Beast because everyone knows it and everyone loves it, and it really does hold a special place in my heart because it is one of my earliest memories.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. I don't know that I like remember what I saw when I was 2 years old, but like I uh, I think I had to have been like I think 4 years old when I saw not this, but um the why why am I drawing a blank? See, it's so far back I can't remember. The Land Before Time.
Yeah.
So I think it's just something about animated films that because there's just something special, and plus I think I remember getting like special Pizza Hut collector's cups for that movie. So
Yeah, I don't remember specifically watching the movie, but I do
yeah.
remember, like I said, watching it over and over and over again. Like it is one of the few movies that I can be assured I watched multiple times as a child, along with The Wizard of Oz and The Land Before Time and the Airbud movies. Loved those. And Beethoven, that was my jam. So yeah, it's definitely just one of the things from my childhood that stands out was my love for this movie. When you can't remember anything else and that sticks out, that says something about the staying power of the story.
Yeah, I think I was about 7 years old when this came out, so I do have a vague memory of going to the theater to see it. Um, you know, it's it's a murky memory. I don't, but I remember like I remember standing in line at the theater because it was like an indoor, like inside the mall movie theater,
Mm-hmm.
and so I do remember that, and funny enough, like that memory stuck with me. I think the reason why the Disney Renaissance films are so special to me, as an adult, let alone when I was a kid. But I went through periods, not to get like sad and depressing for a minute, but I went through a period about, I don't know, 15 years ago when my parents were actually separated for a year. And when you're kind of going through something like that, you reach for childhood nostalgia because you just, you want comfort. And so I remember I very specifically reached out to old Disney animated movies. But this was during like the dark period when Disney still had kept everything in the vault for years on end. So I hadn't seen Beauty and the Beast for years, and the only way you could really watch it was out of print DVDs, which were very, very expensive on eBay. So I remember the first thing I did was like I went and tracked down the soundtrack for the movie and just fell in love with it again through that. And then I think I eventually did track down a DVD copy, but then it was when the movie came out on Blu-ray, and like I got to enjoy the full high def spectacle of the movie. I was like, oh man, I remember how much I love this. It's so yeah, I went on a journey with this, and it's why like today I love Disney movies specifically of this period, because it just brings so much comfort, because these were the movies of my childhood. So
I'm just hearing the lyrics of the the remake. These were the movies of my childhood. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny though because so many of them weren't the movies of my childhood. Actually, I feel like I remember watching more of the non quote unquote Renaissance movies before the big ones. So like I remember watching The Rescuers and probably Oliver and Company, The Aristocats, all of those kinds of things. But it took me until I was 18 to watch The Little Mermaid and Aladdin. So I don't know why I slept on some of the classics as long as I did. But yeah, I think I watched Mulan and Pocahontas when I was a kid as well. So I got some. I saw Hercules when I was that was last year, so 30. So it's been all over the place for me. Like Disney was not such a central feature of my childhood the way it was for some people. I sort of was. I didn't understand quite the overarching effect that they had until a little bit later in life, but now somehow I've become like an accidental fairy tale scholar, so here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no point in being like coy about it. I did pull out the soundtrack that I purchased back I guess this would have been around probably 2008, 2009 when I picked this up. It was the special edition soundtrack. So yeah. And no guilty undertaking. That's not quite how I fell in love with soundtracks, but it was nonetheless a very important purchase for me, because that's all I had to go on for about a year before I was able to actually get a copy of the movie. It's unfathomable to think about now, because now everything's on demand and we have Disney Plus. It's like you can't imagine not being able to find a way to watch Beauty and the Beast.
Yes, praise be to our mouse-eared overlords and their creation of Disney Plus, and now I can watch the remake and the original, and not the extended, but just like you said, having it at your fingertips. And I don't own the physical soundtrack. I don't have a CD player or a computer that can play CDs or DVDs or anything like that. So Apple iMusic it is, or whatever they call it these days, whatever the kids are calling it. Yeah, so I go with the digital versions of things these days. But I appreciate, like, if I'm gonna go physical media, we're doing this. We're doing books.
Oh yeah. No, Leaf, we did not coordinate. But I will say what I did make sure of today was that I didn't shave, because it's Beauty and the Beast. It wouldn't have been right if I like shaved facial hair off. It's not very Beast of me.
It's like Emma. Well, Emma. Emma Watson is so much Belle in the new movie that they're interchangeable at this point. But when Belle asks Beast at the end of the remake, would you grow a beard? Just like John's picking up what Belle is laying down, and
that is a great moment. And to be clear, we are going to be discussing first and foremost the animated classic today. But I do want to say, like, that's the one remake that I've both watched and I actually enjoy. It doesn't hold a candle to the original, but I like it because it's like a revival of a stage musical. It has a different flavor, but it's very true to the original, and it's just kind of another way to enjoy the story. So I've always been a little less harsh on that one, even though it is just another Disney moneymaker scheme.
Oh, it really is. But at the same time, I'm like, John must love this movie because in it we have Gandalf as a clock and Obi-Wan Kenobi as a sassy French candelabra. Does it get better than that?
And plus, Hermione. And I've lately been just a few months ago, I binged the TV show Legion. So now I'm a really big Dan Stevens fan. So it's got him too. So yeah, I'm not gonna really shade the remake, other than to say that the 1991 animated film is such a classic that you can't compare anything to it.
It's true. There's criticisms to be made, but when you have a movie that's as near perfect as the 1991 movie is, as I always say, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it.
I love that, because as a kid, I remember like studying music and surprise in high school with my music appreciation class, and so I was learning about the Baroque period and all that, and so when I would go back to watch Beauty and the Beast, I'm like, oh hey, I get that.
I understood that reference.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that's stuck in my head as a kid. Because I saw this movie when I was so young, I didn't understand what the Baroque period was. But every time I hear the word broke in my head now, it turns into Baroque. These things imprint on you.
Another great one is, there's all the usual things, flowers, chocolates, promises you don't intend to keep.
Apparently that line was ad-libbed by David Ogden Stiers. Well done, sir. Well done.
God.
So great.
So like, I feel like I've been doing this more and more often, and I always tell myself I'm not going to do it because we can just sort of, it's funner just to jump around, and we can do that, but this is a relatively short film, so I feel comfortable like going through, certain, in order landmarks of the film, the songs and everything. We start off with like the prologue, which I always love, and especially because I remember when I went to go see the stage musical version, it had the audio straight from the film, and so I got like chills down my spine just listening to that voice deliver that opening, and it sounds so mythic, and I just love the way it sets the stage. And you've got the stuff with the stained glass windows, and just right off the bat you're reminded of what a beautiful film this is, which by the way, that deer is lifted from Bambi.
There are so many pieces of animation that are lifted directly from other works that come before, like the ending scene. I know we're again jumping ahead, but the final ballroom scene, a lot of that animation comes from Sleeping Beauty because they ran out of time.
It's always reminded me of that. So
exactly, and that's why the clothing is more medieval than late Baroque Rococo, and is therefore delightfully anachronistic.
Yeah, and like I think that's why that, and like this shot in particular has, which is funny because it's lifted like that. There's a reason why it's sort of, if you were to zoom in, there's fewer details on some of the people and stuff. But I've always liked it, probably because since it's, it's imagery pulled from Sleeping Beauty, it always reminded me of that. And God, was I a lover of Sleeping Beauty when I was a kid, and still am. Um, there's just something about that style of animation that I always liked, and it's funny because when I now we're going into Sleeping Beauty, but when I watched that as I got older, I was shocked at how short like the finale of the film is, with the battle, you know and stuff, and when you get the giant dragon and everything, because when I was a kid, that that whole movie just felt so large and epic. And then I become, a grown up and watch it. I'm like, oh, that's only like a short segment of the film. But yeah, no. So I think that's why I love that ending shot so much, is because it reminded me of that, and that's why. So
Sleeping Beauty is one of the ones I don't remember as well. I think I've maybe only seen it once or twice. I was always more of a Cinderella girl. That and this were sort of my childhood staples as it pertains to the princess stories. So it was only a little bit later that I really started to appreciate the rest of it and watch the rest of it. So yeah, that's one I'll have to revisit. But yeah, I read that it was lifted directly from that.
I have a great like story about me and my dad with that, where um when I was a kid and I used to watch that movie all the time, there's a scene in the film where like the two dads are, like I guess it's the part where you got their kids together and married, and they're giving toasts, and I think the line is something like a toast to you and a toast to you, and then but I always said the line when my dad would lead off with a toast to you, and I'd go, and a toast to me. Because I genuinely thought that's what the line was, but I kept getting it wrong. And he always felt shorted by that. But
way to be self-centered, John.
Exactly.
Yeah, just let that ego take right over.
But yeah, so I'd say like the Disney movies that really were always a staple for me were, yeah, first off, Sleeping Beauty. I think that was the one from, that goes back to all the way when I was a little kid, and then it was mostly the Disney Renaissance movies. So it was not so much Little Mermaid, but definitely Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King were sort of like the central to my childhood, and I remember waiting for at least Beauty and the Beast, and especially Aladdin, for the VHS tapes to come out. And, and always looking, I have a memory of looking at the signs in the mall, of they'd have like a display out with like what the date of its release was going to be, and it had like the box art and stuff, and I was like, oh, come on. And it felt like an eternity back then, because not only were like the release windows much longer, especially for Disney movies, but when you're a little kid, everything feels like it takes forever.
Yeah, that time dilation really messes you up as a kid. So
yeah,
yeah, I get that. I can't believe I forgot Lion King, given my proclivity for large cats. Everybody knows I like my cats, and yeah, Lion King was among my favorites as a kid.
Anyway, so let's stop bearing the lead. I mean, let's just get right to the movie kicks off with the song Belle, and we're introduced to Belle, and like this is just again, like when I bought that soundtrack, like a little over 10 years ago or so, as soon as this song came on, I was reduced to being a little kid again. And there's just something so wonderfully joyous about that whole sequence. like I don't even know how to put it into words. It's because it's a great Broadway show tune,
Yeah,
and that's why it works so brilliantly.
it is that perfect musical opener that it was funny because Howard Ashman said that he figured Disney would never let him get away with like a 7-minute opening song. And here it is being this iconic opening scene from any movie ever, really. I listen to this song on the regular, just apropos of nothing, because it's that good. That, like you said, joyous and just full of life. Just, yeah, it always like picks me up.
Because it starts off with Belle just lightly singing, and it's that then it kind of falls into that lull for a second, and then it bounces up with bonjour, bonjour,
Bonjour.
bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. It's just so great.
Yeah, the life that flows through the song, like you said, it starts out sleepy, small provincial town, but then you see, there is some commerce and some hustle bustle, but just throughout the entire scene, you can see Belle viewing it all a little bit at a remove, and you follow her along as she's just sort of like, yeah, this is cool, but I don't really fit in here. And so many people can just relate to that. I
Yes.
relate to this song so hard.
And if I didn't entirely when I was, what, 7 years old, then it certainly probably planted some seeds of like not just sort of settling for what you see around you, but wanting to be your own person. So yeah, especially as and I I'm gonna repeatedly bring up the listening to the soundtrack because that was such a sort of a crucial point for me. I think because like it's weird. That was a very sort of transitional period of time for me because I was just getting out. I think I was just getting out of college at the time, and because of my mom's health and everything, I was still sort of sticking around at home. But then when their separation hit, that's kind of when something like that happens, it kind of shakes you out of your status quo, and you're like, what the hell is sort of my plan now? Because it's just weird. And so I remember the fact that I rediscovered this at that time, and I was listening to the music, and it just so in a way, especially this song and Belle's whole thing, it became sort of very inspirational to me in a way that it's funny how the stuff comes back into your life at when it's supposed to, I think. And it was the fact that I was starting to get older too. Because I was nearing 25 years old at the time, and I feel like 25 is the time when you sort of like realize that you're not always going to be, a youngster, and and yeah, it's just this weird time, and so I just remember listening to it and listening to it over and over and over again, and it was like it really spoke to me, and aside from just what the music's saying, you know it's just so beautifully written, and the film is so beautifully animated. I never tire of watching that sequence because it's a combination of great music, but I love just the animation style, and especially looking back now, I don't mean to be a grump, but with everything being CG nowadays, I look back at this beautiful hand-drawn animation, and I'm like, and now I'm the guy going, they don't make them like this anymore.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
just
that's my reality on a daily basis. I think she implanted on me harder than I ever realized now that I work in a bookstore. So, yeah, I've been paying more attention this week as I've been rewatching this movie, and I noticed her books so much more than I ever have before. Now that I know a little bit more about books and their place in history, and I noticed other people have noticed this as well, but I noticed that her book keeps changing color. It starts out almost like a russety red brown, and then when she shows it to the baker, it's first of all she's holding it kind of backwards, so like if she had opened it she would have been looking at the rear end papers instead of the front. And but then in the next shot, the next slide, basically it's the correct way, as if she would be reading it. Name a more iconic duo, right?
Yeah,
Right?
there is none.
There's none. And then at some point in her basket again, it turns to blue and then back to brown. And then when she gives it to the shopkeeper, at least maybe on my computer when I'm watching it, it almost takes on a purple hue. And I'm like, can you decide on a color for this book?
Well, it's great because as much as I love this movie, I'd be the first to admit there's some animation, like some curious moments of like I think that they were still like, it was a new experience for them working with the caps and doing things on digital versus the traditional way, which most of Little Mermaid was still done completely the old-fashioned way, except for I think there's one shot at the end of the film that's done digitally. But yeah, there are it's great because I think during the scene where they're saying Gaston, there's a moment where like the bear skin like moves from like the chair to the floor, and then the chair disappears in the next shot.
Exactly. Yeah, Gaston has a ton of those. a ton of those. Yeah, I was
Which
reading all the trivia.
Which I don't know. Some of that might irk some people, but I just find it charming as hell because it just goes to show you that nobody's infallible, and these things just happen. So.
It's true. And frankly, it took me forever to notice it. Like, you really have to be eagle-eyed to catch it, and you have to watch it. Like, most of the time when I've been watching this movie, I've just been watching it for fun. I haven't been paying attention to the animation or noticing how the score matches the moments or making notes about, gender portrayals in this fairy tale. And so watching it now with this more critical eye is a completely different experience. And I'm noticing so much more than I ever have before, but that doesn't detract from the movie at all. Like, it's one of those background things that changes nothing about the story, and you can just let it exist without being too worried about it. Oh. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Stephen.
Bonjour.
Belle woke him up with her saying, yeah, it's and that's the thing. I like never notice goofs like on initial viewings. There's some eagle-eyed people who watch stuff and they're like I can't even fathom the person who was watching Lord of the Rings when it first came out and noticed off in the far corner of the wide shot that there was a car driving on the road, which they actually did fix and delete that from the film for its DVD release back in the day. But I'm like, how are you sitting here being overwhelmed by this story and then your eye wanders off to the corner and spots that? I'm not one of those people. So
exactly. I find that especially with animation. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's just the way that my vision works, but I have a hard time tracking all of these minute changes. I very much so tend to focus on what's in the foreground and the faces and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes my attention wanders entirely because I'm 99% sure I have ADHD. So those tiny little background details often are just, completely out of my perception. And it takes the hundreds of watchings that I have now done and actually really sitting down and like gluing my eyes to the screen and tracking things.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm dying at this. And I'm wondering if this is how you feel, Kate. Here we go. the fact that Belle is literally held against her will. But the library totally make up for it.
Yeah. Guys, fellas, ladies, everyone, love can absolutely be bought with a beautiful Rococo library. Remember that. I can absolutely be bought with that.
Yeah, like even I'm like overwhelmed by that scene, and I love on the audio commentary like one of the one of the guys who made it is like, I do not believe that a library that big can exist.
My only thought, well, again, I work in a bookstore. This is what I do with my life. I want to be a librarian. My thoughts when I was watching this, especially this week, was like, that library must be impossible to clean. Like the scale and like just the fact that the drapes alone are several stories tall. Like those must be impossible to launder and to dust. Like when I dust our bookshop, it takes me like days. And we're just a small bookshop in a
But it looks so beautiful.
It is. It's apparently modeled after one of the reading rooms in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. So I believe that. I buy it. So it's, that I've always loved books, more so, in my later years, even more as I've learned more and more about them. But that scene, even as a kid, just every single time, just takes my breath away. Took my breath away, takes my breath away. It's my literal dream in life to have a library like that. Bookshelf daddy. Yeah, who needs a sugar daddy? I need a bookshelf daddy. You know what I need is one of those rolling ladders at work, but our bookshelves are not affixed to the wall, so it might be a little dangerous. My boss did joke about putting one in, and I was like, it'd probably fall over. So, but then I could literally just like do that musical number by myself every morning in the shop, and I would be perfectly happy living out my life that way. Yes.
Yeah,
oh my god. Yeah.
The dress.
So when I went to buy my prom dress, I wanted something that sort of had that Belle feel, and my mom talked me out of it. And I still haven't quite forgiven her 13 years later. So I understand that. But yes, that dress.
Like, and that's the thing, like, it's funny that one of my, like, you might be surprised that one of my quibbles with the live action version would be the dress, but it is because like that dress is so iconic. It's like I think they were going for something that was more period correct, but it's like, for God's sake, it
wasn't though. It wasn't even more period correct. No, the only thing that I could say that might have been even remotely closer to period accuracy would be the fact that it had sort of this like V in the front, which would be more reminiscent of a robe à la française, which would basically be like a V in the front and would have something under it called a stomacher, which is basically just like a piece of fabric that goes over the corset that has sort of like a pattern on it that would peek through the dress kind of thing. But the shape of the skirt and the cap sleeve and all of those, and the jewelry that went with it, the ear cuff, the hair piece, all of it was way too modern. I know Belle is ahead of her time, but we're not talking like 200 years ahead of her time. And it just didn't capture the movement. And even though it had that sort of gold filigree on it, it didn't catch the light. It did nothing for the dress except in stills. And so I completely understand your quibbles with the remake dress.
Yeah, it's like I'm sorry. Like if you're doing Beauty and the Beast, you have
to nail the dress.
You have to. Yeah, there's no question. Like that's.
It's like the one thing you have to nail out of everything is that dress, and they didn't. It's pretty. Like I would have loved to wear that to prom. I really would have, but for a remake of that caliber, of that size, of that budget, to get a dress like that didn't hit it for me.
No. So anyway, but I told myself this wasn't going to be a string of just bagging on the parts of the remake that I didn't like. But yeah,
but it just goes to show why this was so great.
Yeah.
Why it just stood the test of time, because that dress is iconic. So,
and like again, like watching, I'm just going to say this repeatedly about different parts of the movie, but like watching, that scene today, I was just like I was telling you before we went on, like same thing with the ending. It's just chills down my spine. It's the way it makes me feel is like there are very few movies that I have that sort of that my body has that kind of reaction to. And Beauty and the Beast is one of them, because before we went on, I watched like the last 2 minutes of the film over again, just to make sure I was fully in that headspace. And even without the context of the rest of the movie, I was like on the verge of tears, just when that final shot of the window, it pulls out and the chorus is singing, and it's just, this is one of the most beautiful, emotional, like heart-wrenching, wonderful films ever made. And so yeah, it's I never ever tire of watching it.
I really like. I watched it 3 times this week or more. Well, yeah, I watched the original theatrical cut, then I watched the remake, then I watched the extended cut, and all within a week. And not to mention just the other thinking and reading and consumption of other content about this surrounding it. I've been steeped in it all week, and I'm not bored. I am not done with it yet. I'll probably go watch like the cocktail version later or something. I meant to do that this week, but I didn't get to it. So if I wasn't working this week, I was watching Beauty and the Beast and loving every minute of it, because like you said, it just is one of those movies that gets you every time and really hits you in the heart. And for me too, part of it is also just everything that went into the making of this movie and the people who were a part of it. I think I was watching a YouTube video of Paige O'Hara and her, a few years ago. Yeah, you better go do it when we're done here.
We've succeeded in our mission if we achieve nothing else.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was watching this video of Paige O'Hara and just her talking about her experience with doing it and her continuing the legacy of Belle all of these years. Like after watching that, I wanted to cry, and I'm dead inside. So that tells you something. So yeah.
You even got it in the air.
I'm very into details.
Let's yeah, you've come to these things in costume before, so
yeah, it's funny because when we did the Little Mermaid stream, I was a brunette and I wore a red wig, and now I'm doing the Belle stream and I'm a redhead. But yes, I've got the rose. I actually have a tree ornament that's Belle's dress that I picked up when I went to see the stage version in Vancouver in, I guess that was 2015. At Lumiere. I've got a selection of fairy tales and books and adaptations of the story and fitting things. There's, my copy of Shakespeare over here because they were reading Romeo and Juliet to each other. So I'm very into details. This is how I roll.
Which, by the way, I want to take the opportunity right now to welcome a couple new faces. Just because you may have noticed them in the chat. Well, I've had the privilege of meeting these wonderful people in a chat the other night, which I went to go support AK because she was on, and let me it was I don't know if this is, I'm assuming this is what he goes by, JD, his channel. And they were talking about Wheel of Time. So I just wanted to welcome you guys and thank you for supporting. It's wonderful to have you here. And if you're wondering when AK is going to be on the channel, I went ahead and I talked to her. She's going to be joining me and Erin on a discussion on Stardust in January, which I swear is the soonest I could schedule that. It'd be great to have her back on the channel. She gave me a little bit of a teasing the other night where she said she was feeling slighted that she hadn't been on the channel in a few weeks. So I am correcting that, definitely. But that'll be a lot of fun. Anyway, so moving back over to Beauty and the Beast, like you mentioned, we were just talking about Lumiere. Let's just talk about Lumiere and Cogsworth.
Oh my god, just the best again with the comedic duos in this movie, or the legendary duos that come out of this. You have Beauty and the Beast, Lumiere and Cogsworth, Ashman and Menken, Potts and Chip.
I mean, I adore everything with them in this movie, but especially that first sequence with them when Belle's father comes into the castle and they're just whispering to each other, and of course that great moment when when Maurice picks up Lumiere and he's like, "Hello, hello," and then Lumiere taps him on the shoulder.
Hello.
He's like, "Hello."
Best. The best. Oh, my favorite of them is right before Be Our Guest, when Lumiere's getting all up in Belle's grill. You know, they're introducing themselves to her formally, and Cogsworth is like trying to push him out of there. It's like, please. Oh, I love that bit. Just the back and forth, the jockeying for position that they constantly do. Just, I believe that was my idea. Yes, it's hard for me to reconcile. I didn't really know that much about Jerry Orbach until like yesterday. I remember him as Jake Houseman, and I know he was on Law and Order, but I had no idea his long career on Broadway and how much of a talented singer and stage performer he was until fairly recently. And it's hard to reconcile the image of him with this French candelabra.
Yeah, I always knew him from Law and Order, despite the fact that I never ever watched Law and Order. But it was such a sort of staple, that I just, and so whenever I saw behind the scenes like footage of him doing the voice of Lumiere, I was like, that just looks weird. But he's so insanely talented, and he's done so much over his career. And there's a great story I was listening to the commentary about the fact that when they went back to sing to record Human again after 10 years later, I guess he had just been doing Law and Order like the night before, and then he comes in the next morning and he's right into Lumiere without skipping a beat. I just love it.
Yeah, I watched a YouTube clip of, must have been like the 1992 Oscars or some performance on an award show a few years after the movie came out, and they did a montage where Paige O'Hara featured as Belle and Richard White as Gaston and Jerry Orbach as Lumiere, and you could see him in person. He wasn't even dressed up like the Candlestick, he was just wearing a tuxedo, and they did the Be Our Guest, and he was part of the kick line and everything, and I was like, damn, he is killing it. He must have been in his late 50s or early 60s at that point, and he just had so much energy, and like you said, stepped right back into that role, and it was fun to watch him do it instead of this, what is it that Cogsworth calls him, like pesky paraffin something, I don't know. There's a paraffin joke in there.
I just remember that he calls Cogsworth overgrown pocket watch.
Oh yes, classic.
No, but the way that Lumiere is animated is just brilliant. Like the stuff he does during, Be Our Guest. The stuff where he's just like tipping his hat and,
Oh yes, and even though he has no legs, it looks like they make him try to kick as if he has legs. Oh, and I found the quote, by the way. You pompous, paraffin-headed pea brain. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I just, and Be Our Guest is just, it's absolute brilliance, and the whole song, but speaking of Lumiere again, just the way he's like, course by course, one by one. It's
you shall.
oh.
And if I'm done. Oh man, seeing that live as part of the stage production was just like the highlight of my 20s. 20s. You heard that correctly. The highlight of my 20s. Yeah, everything about that. Well, the anachronisms. There's the Eiffel Tower makes an appearance, which wasn't built until much later. But other than that, it's just
that's part of the joy. But that's the great joy of sort of Disney movies, is that they can, especially during musical numbers, they can throw in all those modern references, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, like, we're not even talking Aladdin, but for God's sake, the genie, like the sheer number of references that are like not even aimed at kids, but are aimed at adults, and and there it's just like, and that. But what Disney was really good at was, like, even if those were references for adults, and and things that kids might not necessarily get, they did such a great job of making it fun for kids regardless. So if they didn't even know what it was a reference to, they still thought it was insanely funny.
That's the beauty of coming back to stuff like this. You start to unpack the layers of it as your understanding of the world matures. But as a kid, it's just pure fun. And you get, yes, rest in peace, Robin Williams, the king of comedy. But you just get a view into the world through Chip, mostly. And he's just like, what's there, mama? Oh, if you want to feel old, go look up pictures of what the kid who voiced Chip looks like now.
I don't need that in my life. I really don't.
Right? I stumbled upon it. And I was just like, wow.
But you are absolutely right, because, if you're a real tiny little kid watching this, your point of view is Chip.
Yeah.
You can really identify with him, and then you get older and you watch this and you're like, oh dear God, now I'm the adult.
I'll tell you when you're older.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now I'm older and I get it. I get it all. Like, speaking of human again, you have to have watched the the extended special edition fairly recently to remember this, but there's a moment in the sequence where they're cleaning the castle where they like clean and make the bed that you only understand as an adult. You're like, so the servants thought they were gonna do that tonight. That ruins the childhood now, doesn't it? I don't know. Am I the only one who appreciates the Human Again song more now that I'm older?
I'll be honest, like, I as far as like getting stuff, I'm sure I do now, but I really appreciated that after I finally saw the stage musical, and not so much before I did, because also I'm always a grouch about, like, obviously there's some exceptions that, like if we're talking like Lord of the Rings or, Blade Runner, stuff like that, there's alternate versions of the films that are, very necessary, but occasionally I can be a grouch about just adding in extra footage. But after I saw the musical, I was like really just excited about seeing something that, that first popped up in, even though it was originally supposed to be in the movie, but it appeared for the first time in the musical, and then going back and having that in the film, I kind of really appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think it's made all the better by the fact that it was an Ashman song. It fit with the rest of them. It wasn't something added later. Like, there were some songs that Menken and Rice added for the musical. For Beast, the If I Can't Love Her, and the songs that they did for the remake, that again, it felt like they needed to add music at a point in the movie, and so they just wrote another song. Whereas this was something that Ashman wanted in, and it got cut. And so when it was added back in, it felt right, because when I watched it directly after the theatrical cut, it became all the more apparent that a scene was missing from the middle of the movie where a lot of stuff was explained about that date night that they had. Because the way that it ends is with Madame de Garderobe coming out on the patio, on the balcony, and she's wearing human clothes on the outside. And she jumps off into the fountain, and then the water splash goes into the bathtub scene where Beast is getting ready. And just the transition of that is so perfect. And so when you're watching just the theatrical cut, it's just this splash of water, and then boom, Belle and Beast are having a date. But the human again sequence just expresses all of the emotions of these inanimate objects who were once people, who now have the chance and the hope that life and light and love will come back into the castle, and that humanity itself will return, both in themselves and in their master, learning to love and to just to be a better person, I guess. Just to, this hope in things getting better for them. And so when I was younger, I was like, okay, this is kind of boring. It's going on too long. What does it really add? But like I said, now that I'm a little bit older and I understand more layers of this film, I found myself not being as annoyed with it this time around. And it felt like the movie needed it to bridge that gap between something there and Beauty and the Beast, Tale as Old as Time. That sequence in the ballroom feels completely different after watching. Yes, I agree. It belonged there, and Ashman meant for it to be there. And so now when you watch both, you're like, yeah, no, it feels missing now. So anyway.
Yeah, and plus, I mean, not only just with all the all the servants and everything, but you also, there's an added moment with Belle and the Beast as well, where they're
Yes, the
reading, and
reading.
it just feels like it's showing, like, it's just, I hate to use this phrase because it sounds like a negative thing, but just padding out that corner of the story to give a little more, like, it's giving you some understanding of some other things, but it's also letting the film breathe in that time, so that it feels just a little bit less abrupt, that they're having this romantic dinner, and it builds up to it more.
Exactly. You get a little hint of it, and there's something there. There may be something there that wasn't there before. But other than them sitting in front of the fire with her showing him a book, you don't really see that bonding. And then there's a humanizing moment when Belle realizes that he can't read, which is ridiculous, but it serves that story, I guess, a little bit, when she tries to teach him to read. Okay, I get why they picked Romeo and Juliet, but it's not the best romance that they could have picked, because they both die at the end. But, two lovers in fair Verona and all that stuff. And then, they reference that in the remake. And that's what she talks to Mr. Potts about as she's about to visit Carole there.
I mean, as long as we're throwing in, like, the references that aren't correct for the time period, I think what my preference for a romantic story thrown in there would have been.
A little bit of someone named Jane, and
there
her character named Elizabeth, and yeah,
which actually would have been very fitting.
It's kind of hard to exactly place this in time, because like we're definitely pre-revolution, because Beast still has a head. And we're definitely like post 1760s, but yeah, it's a little hard to pin down exactly. But yeah, that sort of late 18th century romance. It could have been I can't remember exactly. What do you know? What year? I can Google it if you don't. What year Pride and Prejudice originally came out?
I don't know, because I know that's like my personal favorite film
Oh,
version even takes place like a decade or so prior, I think.
1813 is when it was written, so it would have been, well, too late.
Yeah, but like,
I get what you're saying. If you're going to include the Eiffel Tower, you can throw in some Jane Austen. Yeah, at that's the thing though, is the
but
Shakespeare would have been popular.
I think then that's why that Romeo and Juliet was chosen, because you can just get away with the time period for that. I'm oh my god, Tawny, is that how you say? I don't want to pronounce your name wrong, but seriously, we are gonna get along fabulously. Just go ahead and check back to some of my previous videos.
Have you met the Knights of Kira? Wait, am I pointing? No, there we go. Yeah, I always get turned around with the mirroring of the camera. Anyway.
I'm going to avoid derailing this too much, because this would very quickly just turn into a Knights of Kira live stream, but that is not the focus today. So,
There's a
but
focus?
I know we have just kind of like, this has gone from starting off as Beauty and the Beast to just a general Disney stream to at times bringing it back to Beauty and the Beast.
It happens.
I'm staying strong today. I really am.
Anyway,
I just have to make it a couple more minutes, and then we'll be able to do the mid roll, and I'll definitely be safe. But yeah, no. Well, as a matter of fact, no. I mean, we kind of hit a good break point, I feel like. So let's just go ahead and do the mid roll right now. For those of you new, we're not going anywhere. We're still doing this for about another hour. We're just doing the mid roll where we're gonna, I'm gonna talk about what's coming up, and like I usually do with most of my guests, I'm gonna try and convince Kate to create her own channel.
That sounds like work.
But anyway, if anybody's watching this who hasn't subscribed to the channel, if for some bizarre reason you are finding my long-winded musings interesting, or at the very least, if you're finding, my guest interesting, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Talk about movies each week, different stuff all the time. I'll just go ahead and say it, since we're in the mid-roll anyway, this is the time for it. Basically, it started off as a joke, and we have a Slack group where basically a bunch of us, from the chat group, and also if you watch the other stream that I'm on, Here Be Dragons, that's kind of where it started. It's basically the Here Be Dragons Slack, and we have a whole bunch of different discussion channels in that group. And I started one that was just for a couple of my friends and me, called the Knights of Kira. And
it's not what it was originally called.
It's not what it was originally called. Originally, the channel was called John's Wife, which was, sorry. Apologies to anybody who is like, I have to get out of this right now. But anyway, it eventually became the Knights of Kira, and then I went ahead and started, having discussions on the channel about various Keira Knightley movies, because I all of a sudden had some friends who shared my my love of Miss Knightley and her films. So yeah,
It's thirst.
Hey, we're trying to ease these people in, Kate. Okay.
I call it like it is.
So yeah, it started off like that, and it's kind of grown, and it's great, depending on your point of view. But yeah, go ahead. There's a section on my channel that is labeled Knights of Kira. You'll see all the discussions on there. And yeah. now I'm going to try and change course so I can be turning a little less red. Um, as far as what's coming up next week on the channel, uh, it's going to be following up on the Lord of the Rings streams that I had last year. We're going to be doing one big mega stream for all three of the Hobbit films, which is ironic since it should have been one film. Uh, and I'm going to be having returning to the stream. Uh, we're going to be having Kelly, or otherwise known as Jaded Redhead, or Jaded Redhead. She's going to kill me. Helen, the Clueless Fangirl, Dan, voice of Geekdom, Carole Brown, and of course, Erin, who would have killed me if she wasn't on this stream because, unlike Lord of the Rings, I actually have things that I object to in the Hobbit films, and she wants to hear me gripe about things. So that's going to be a lot of fun next week. So make sure you tune in for that. No, God dang it, Steven, they're going to believe you. Okay, don't.
Oh man.
No. Anyway, so yeah, tune in for that next week. Then the week after that, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to Orlando to spend the time with, the wonderful Christina and her husband Brian. We're gonna go to Galaxy's Edge. So I'm going to get to go to Star Wars Land for the first time ever. So I'm very excited about that. I'll bring back some pictures so you guys can be jealous. And then I've got some stuff planned for after that, but I'll announce that next week. I'll let you guys wait on that. Yeah, guilty. You're right. Which is why, like, it's not going to be all negative stuff. I'm going to have a lot of stuff that's that I like about the Hobbit films. So we're going to talk about that. And he made Lord of the Rings, so he gets, like, I'm always going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's allowed to not be, perfectly on game all the time. Okay. So now I've got all that out. Kate, you don't have your own channel yet, but is there, like, if you have anything you want to, throw out there, now is your
No.
opportunity. You're not very active on Twitter, so I can't even.
No, Twitter is a cesspool that I stay away from. So yeah. Yeah, I'm around. I don't have a channel, but if you guys invite me to do other things, you'll see me there.
Yeah, if nothing else, you'll see her the next time, we're talking about a Disney movie.
At this point, yeah, it's become my niche, apparently.
Or, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was going to say, I'm sorry I don't talk about MCU stuff because you'd be like number one on the list.
Yeah.
But we're not going to go down that road.
that would turn into like a WWE SmackDown.
Plus I don't want to make the new people angry and leave the channel. So, yeah. No, anyway, so Steven, I haven't talked about it yet. I was going to save that for last. Everybody go ahead and tune in to Here Be Dragons tomorrow. Steven, Nessie, and I, with special guest Sasuke, are going to be talking about the first season of What We Do in the Shadows, which, I've been trying to talk people into watching forever. But everybody's been sleeping on it. No, actually people have been trying to talk me into watching it for like the past year and a half. And then finally I just watched it a couple months ago, and Steven just watched the first season. So
take it from someone who had horrific nightmares of vampires growing up and just avoided everything vampire and, never watched Twilight or anything like that. This show is amazing. Go watch it. Go binge it. It's only 10 episodes. Incredible.
It's called What We Do in the Shadows. It's basically a documentary about vampires.
Vampires living in modern day Staten Island and doing mundane vampire stuff.
They've got all their shit together, though. They really do.
It's so funny. As someone who doesn't really mess with the vampire lore, I had so much fun watching that show. Yes, it's entirely worth your investment of time to watch. And they're only like 20-minute episodes, so 10 episodes, 20 minutes each. Just go do it. You will not be disappointed.
No judgment. If it'll get you to watch the show.
No, it's not even so much judgment as like I just literally haven't watched it. Like I avoided vampire stuff because of like this weird phobia that I had, or weird aversion to it that I had because of horrific childhood dreams. Anyway.
I don't have my toothpick, so that's why you can all see me instead of Jackie Daytona.
Yeah. And I have a human beer.
Oh God. I cannot wait to talk about this show tomorrow. It's going to be so much fun. Anyway, so I feel like we've digressed plenty enough. So yeah, and we'll recap again at the end. Let's dive back into Beauty and the Beast and let's talk about the gentleman of gentlemen, Gaston.
No one fights like Gaston, douses lights like Gaston. In wrestling matches, nobody bites like Gaston.
I mean, look at that guy. I mean, you just love him right away, don't you?
Totally. I'm not getting Narcissus vibes at all.
Well, it's so funny because, you know, I guess the idea behind Gaston was that he was the guy who in a typical Disney movie would be the prince. But I remember seeing this as a kid, and like at no point was I deceived about what kind of guy Gaston was. Like from the moment he steps on screen, it's like, oh my God, this guy is such a jerk.
Yeah, they paint him as a douche immediately, which is perfect. But there's just this moment in the Belle song where he stops her and he's like, how can you read this? There's no pictures. You just know that he's an ignorant, boorish, brainless, that there's this sort of dichotomy drawn between reading good and non-reading bad. And you put Gaston on the bad side immediately because of that. You identify with Belle, you know she's a good person. He doesn't appreciate her pursuit of knowledge, and that therefore puts him in the evil villain camp.
Yeah. Gaston, you're positively primeval. Why, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, he's so dumb. I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's something about, and again, talking about the live action version, I actually quite like what why am I drawing Luke Evans what he did, but it feels like a different take on Gaston. This Gaston is like, he's thick-headed, but he but there's a directness to his, like, how twisted and evil he is. I feel like Luke Evans' take is more like, he feels a bit dumber, but he's also like but he's also like more, I feel like more deceptive in a way.
Yeah, they start off trying to make him a little bit more sympathetic and having him be really nice to Belle. He brings her flowers. He speaks to her very gently. He's not as forward or as forceful, because in the animated feature, he is very much so physically aggressive with her. And they sort of tone that back a little bit. But I think they do make him, they make him clever and manipulative, but not so much smart. Yeah. Like one of the lines that always makes me sort of giggle is where LeFou is like, like, de je ne sais quoi. I don't know what that means.
See,
like,
now
how did you grow up in France?
See, now I'm really being reminded of like a lot of the stuff that I really do like about the live action version. It does have some really good qualities. But anyway, back to the animated Gaston. He's just like
He's
he's so
comedically dumb.
insufferable. Yeah.
Yeah. He's so like just again cartoonishly egotistical, narcissistic, hyper masculine, ego driven, and there's no room for interpretation with this Gaston.
Yeah, I absolutely love when he knocks on the door and Belle sees him through, whatever it is her father's built, the, elaborate peephole, and the look on her face, like,
she rolls her eyes, just knowing what's coming. Yeah.
It's like and that's the thing, like, I feel like almost in the beginning of the live action version, there's almost this element, like, you could almost give him the benefit of the doubt for a minute, because it almost seems like he's trying to be somewhat nice. There's no giving the benefit of the doubt to animated Gaston, because he's like so immediately repulsive.
Yeah, he's just a jerk, plain and simple, and he is it's one of those things that you don't even really like notice until you're an adult and you have more experience in life. But just Belle's body language when they're in the cottage together, and she's constantly backing away from him and turning her body and averting her gaze, and she literally tries to put a rocking chair between them at one point, and he just knocks it over, gets all up in her grill, backs her against the door, puts one hand on either side of her head, and tries to kiss her. And then the door magically decides that it swings both ways and lets him out the door. But it's just so physically aggressive in that scene. And you can see Belle's discomfort in him trying to force himself on her. Like, he feels entitled to her being his wife. He thinks he's, the best guy in town, and therefore he deserves the best, which means the most beautiful woman in town. Like, the two are equated automatically, even though they have nothing in common and would not make a good pair. And it just is, very uncomfortable for everyone. Hey, Cassie. Hi.
Yeah, it's like, it's funny because obviously there's some things to be said about, in watching Beauty and the Beast in a modern context, and talking about Belle's captivity and stuff. But I think sort of the linchpin of the whole thing comes down to the fact that whatever you think of Beast, and especially early on in the film, the way, what he does and perhaps the way he acts, like the way the whole thing is sold is that, like, opposite Beast, you have the walking embodiment of toxic masculinity. so
the thought that occurred to me was Toxic Masculinity, the musical. Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost like no matter what, anybody's better than Gaston. So.
It's so true. It's funny because the original fairy tale was very much centered on Belle and her spiritual growth and her acceptance of, a guy who was nice, never abusive to her, but kind of repulsive. And she had to kind of overcome her superficial preconceptions to accept a man who was kind and generous and friendly, intelligent in some versions, not so intelligent in others. But the Disney adaptation took everything and flipped it on its head. They're like, you know what, Beast is the one with the problems. And so Beast is at the center of all of this. He is the one who has to go on the journey of becoming a better person, learning about kindness and love and humanity. And Gaston is the foil to that. And so that's why they had to create the character of Gaston that never existed. And, well, there was sort of a version that existed in the 1946 Cocteau adaptation, but in the original fairy tale, there was no other man vying for Belle's attention. She, wasn't really interested in marrying anyone. She wanted to stay home with her father, basically, and take care of him. And so Gaston is this creation of, he's basically what Beast would have been if he were not turned into a beast. There's so many parallels between the two that they're very consciously created in opposition to each other.
I just want to throw this out. Like I'm totally thick because I should have said this during the mid roll. If you want to join the Slack, Tawny, just go ahead and email at we3dragons@gmail.com, and somebody will get you into the Slack. We have a great time. Honestly, I mean this with every fiber of my being. It's the greatest group of people you could ever know, except for me, of course, that you could ever possibly know, and they all mean so much to me. So if you want to join the Slack, absolutely just send us an email and we'll get you in there.
We're just okay.
Yeah, as that's an in joke that you will certainly get sooner or later.
You'll pick it up.
Yeah. So I see something that's being discussed. Is this the first time we've seen like chest hair in?
That's a really good question that I don't actually know the answer to. But just like that, and every last inch is covered in hair.
That whole song, yeah, and so now I eat 5 dozen, and so I'm roughly the size of a barge.
I love how he just swallows 4 or 5 eggs
while singing. Yeah, while singing.
Like he's still singing as the eggs are going down. That entire sequence is just comedic gold. Everything about it is so funny. And especially like the refrain of it after Maurice comes in is just like, no one plots like Gaston, takes cheap shots like Gaston, tries to persecute harmless crackpots like Gaston. Like, it's just so clever.
And what I really love about that is because you think the song has ended, and then you have the whole section where Maurice comes in, and they toss him out, and then the song picks up again, and it's just like, for a character that's so despicable, like he seriously has one of the all-time greatest songs ever for his character. I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
Ursula and Scar are just top tier, S tier.
Yeah, and it's just because what's great about him is he's just a scumbag. Like there's nothing particularly special about him. He's just,
And that's the thing. The entire town is taken with him. Even Belle's father in the animated version is like, what about that Gaston? He seems like a nice fellow. Oh, Papa, he's not the one for me. Like, duh. What made you think Gaston was a good guy? That's the thing. It's that facade. It's that assumption that whoever's good looking is the nice guy. And that's what the entire fairy tale is trying to overcome. That this, paragon of masculinity, who's extremely handsome, is the villain, and the ugly guy, who I still think is adorable. Let's be real. Come on, he's the bad guy. He's terrifying, but he's actually just a giant teddy bear. Like once you peel back the layers of shame and guilt and frustration and loneliness, just a giant teddy bear.
Yeah, I mean, well, and the whole thing with Gaston, like that becomes like, okay, there's some stuff that perhaps, not perhaps, let's just say it. In Disney movies, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't age great. But the idea behind Gaston actually, ages wonderfully because it continues to be true. Like this really toxic guy who, is loved in the community pretty much for being awful. Um, and he thinks he can get whatever he wants just because he's, handsome, which whatever, and popular. It's absolutely insufferable, but you continue to see it in the world we live in. So
Yeah, that's what makes him such a great villain, is that people kind of like Gaston.
yeah,
And so he's relatable, unfortunately relatable in that way, uh, to people's lives. And I hope that, that original animated movie taught young boys that it's okay to be sensitive, and that it's okay to be a little bit different, and that you'll find people in your life, both romantic and non-romantic, who care about your well-being and who like you for who you are. And that once you are comfortable being yourself, you will find people, you will attract people to you that, that enhance your life in the way that Belle, look at the way things changed for Beast in the castle and everyone in it when she came. It's just remarkable how much more life and light and happiness was found when, you know, when a
yeah.
good person entered his life.
Well, it's really interesting about uh, Beast, because I mean, the thing about, like, the fact of the matter is, if you've been turned into, you know, a monster essentially, and the longer you are, a beast, um, you know, the more you're going to see yourself as a beast, and he's becoming like, you know, the creators even said, like, part of it is that if Belle had never shown up, he would have just continued on to be more and more beast-like until, eventually there was nothing human about him left. And so it's really great when, you get people who sort of come into your life that inspire you to, you know, just be better, and to be, to regain, part of your humanity if you've lost that. And so I just find that a really beautiful story, which, not to, again, not to say that after, 30 years that it's a perfect story and its depiction of certain things, but I think generally the ideas behind it are, are wonderful, and, uh, and inspiring. So
Yeah, there are a few things that miss the mark, but like you said, just that idea of going deeper beyond the surface and regaining a part of yourself that you've lost, and surrounding yourself with people that make you better in general. I think that's a good piece of advice for anyone, is always find people who appreciate you for you and who bring out the best in you. I think Beast had sort of lapsed into a sense of helplessness and was just only left to wallow with everything that he had done wrong in his life and his own loneliness. And then a person like Belle comes in, and within 24 hours, he opens up to her and warms to her and starts thinking, like, I've never felt this way about someone before. Like, I've never met someone like her, basically, where just her, this is so terrible because, women are not just objects and whatever, but, her
yeah,
existence is enough for him. And, like, I like to think that she's more than just an object to him, a method by which he can end his curse. But she just is such a good person. Her very core of her being is kindness and gentleness and empathy and understanding for others, that allows her the patience to work with someone like the Beast to teach him to read and to teach him some basic skills that his parents never got to teach him. You know, there's some Oedipal stuff hiding beneath the surface of that. You know, we don't have to go there. But yeah, she's just such a positive force in his life. And yeah, I don't know. I have so many like thoughts about this in my head that are like jumbling together right now that it's not coming out cohesively. But yeah, she's just such a positive force in his life, and he immediately recognizes that just within less than a day. He's like, wow, her very being, the center of her being is so positive that it changes him almost immediately.
Well, there can be some debate about how much time passes too. The I think the big thing that throws people off is the fact that LeFou is stuck out in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
Can't have been for that long, but then you look at the scenes with Belle and Beast at the castle, and at least for me, I get the impression that some substantial time passes. So
it almost makes me wonder if time passes differently in the castle and out of the castle, but that's a whole can of worms.
But yeah, so
and there's also the fact that Maurice wants to go rescue Belle and he leaves, and the journey between their little town and the castle can't be that long. So
well, and this is the part where like you're best not to examine those details too closely, because then you get the whole thing which they had to expand upon in the live action version, which is, why don't the people of this town realize that they live pretty close to a giant castle where in it lives a prince? So apparently they're ruled over by some kind of royalty.
Well, that's the thing. At the time, like France was a bunch of principalities or whatever, and they all have their kind of ruling nobility. I think the remake does a half decent job at answering that in terms of like, oh, the Enchantress made it so that everybody forgot that they were even there. Super messed up, by the way.
I remember hearing that. Like, I just like, you see somebody going there like, all right, plot hole number 1, check. Like we took care of that with the addition of a single line.
It's true. Like it's funny because, like I said, there are very few like real problems with the storytelling of the first one. That is one of them. Is the why does nobody think of their ruler being missing for nigh on a decade, and nobody stumbles upon this castle before then? Yeah, there's some problems. That's one of them. Then they create some new problems, but again, not the.
But this is the kind of thing that doesn't really matter when you're watching an animated fairy tale that only runs for 80 minutes. It's the kind of stuff that doesn't really, like, it's not of immediate concern to the emotional truth of the film. So it was never something that particularly bothered me. And as a matter of fact, I don't think I ever wondered about it until people started until that issue was raised when they were talking about the live action movie and the fact that they were solving that. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I really thought of it either. Like you said, you just suspend your disbelief and you're like, magic. That's why. Just magic.
Yeah, and so I want to make sure that we go through a couple of the songs that we haven't like really focused in on something there, which is just, I remember I was watching one of the bonus features a while back and on the Blu-ray, and there was this get together with Alan Menken, like a couple other, I think, musicians, like sort of more modern musicians. I think Lin-Manuel Miranda was there, and they were just kind of gushing about the music, and Lin-Manuel just starts, singing the lyrics and stuff, and just you could tell the excitement in their voices, because the music in this film has been such a important sort of uh you know touchstone for so many people who have gone on uh to become famous. And I just love the part of the song where all the lyrics, just especially when Belle's like, oh God, what is I need? I really need the lyrics in front of me because this is driving me crazy. But
I mean, I could just sing you the song, but I don't think people want to hear
just
that.
no.
I don't know how my microphone's going to pick it up, because this microphone doesn't deal well with high notes. So
Yeah, it's the part where she's like, and a bit alarming. Yeah,
who'd have ever thought that this could be that part? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's no wonder that I grew up to be such a ridiculous, hopeless romantic, because this is the stuff I was watching as a kid. And while I know for a fact that like whenever I have Disney conversations with people in the so-called real world, it always comes down to, what's your favorite Disney movie? And most of the people I talk to will either say Aladdin or The Lion King, and I'm always like Beauty and the Beast. So yeah. It's just, I'm a sucker for the romance. So
what I love about that portion of it as well is that it does call back musically to Belle's song, where she sings, here's where she meets Prince Charming, and she won't discover that it's him till chapter 3. Like it not only lyrically but musically, they're like copies of each other, or mirrors of each other, more like. Oh, thanks, Blue. Yeah, I used to sing, but my voice is all messed these days, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah, it's just so perfectly mirrored in that scene where she's reading the book, and it's about, she says that this book is her favorite. It's magic spells, daring sword fights, magic spells, a prince in disguise, and she doesn't realize that it's her story. And then later she meets her Prince Charming, but she's like, not true that he's no Prince Charming, but there's something in him that I simply didn't see.
Oh God.
Yeah, and it carries on so perfectly, and then he turns into her Prince Charming.
I just, it breaks my heart every time I think about, Howard Ashman and the fact that, that he passed away. He was such a genius. Just his lyrics are just something else. And so, like, part of me prays that, like, if he is somewhere out there in the universe, I doubt he's listening to my YouTube stream, but like I would just want to thank him 1,000 times over for what he put into the music, because and I love the line I was just talking about where she says a bit alarming. I love the story behind that, where apparently he had really lost his voice by that point, and Paige O'Hara was singing it, and he was like on the phone or something, and he told them to tell him, it was like, for that line, for Paige, tell her Streisand.
Yes, yes, I heard the same trivia piece in a video. Yeah. That's all I could think about. I was like, yep, Streisand. That's the one. Yeah, it's I just love too, like, just the entire vibe of that song is so fun and Christmassy.
Yeah.
Like, the film doesn't explicitly take place at Christmas, but it sounds kind of like a Christmas carol. And it's just so beautiful.
And it's also, it's the first time that you really hear the voice that's inside of the beast, because the movie starts off, we obviously get his very aggressive beast voice, and his voice lightens throughout the movie, but it's at that point where we get to hear basically the human version of beast, and just again the way he's like, she glanced this way, I thought I saw, all that stuff. It's like this the shy, sort of timid guy inside of this beast, and the way he's talking about her, it's just so, like, it melts your heart. It's just so beautiful.
And it is a truth universally acknowledged that in a musical, when people start singing, it's because there's too much emotion and they can't vocalize their feelings in mere words. And this is like the only time you hear Beast sing in the movie.
Yeah.
And that says something, where it's like he's just having this quiet moment with her playing in the snow, and he can't contain himself anymore. He's like, she glanced this way, I thought I saw. Like, he just starts singing in his head, and you're just like, and then the bird comes into his hand, and he's like, just his like big goofy smile. I can't even with the big goofy smile that he does then, and he does it in the dance scene as well.
Yeah, when he smiles at Lumiere and Cogsworth, he's like, like,
what's happening? Yeah, it's so great.
And then the way that they're like, yeah.
They're just cheering him on like his bros. Like, love it. Yeah. No, it's, again, the only time you really hear Robbie Benson sing in this, which is kind of a shame because he has quite a nice voice. But speaking of Robbie Benson and his voice, I was a big fan of Sabrina and the Teenage Witch when I was a kid. Yes, he really does become adorable. And so Robbie Benson, he directed a couple episodes of Sabrina the Teenage Witch in the first season, and he also guest starred as Sabrina's dad in a few episodes. And the first time you meet him, he's walking down the back stairs of the Spellman house, and he's like, "Don't make me use the voice!" And you can just hear Beast. And I'm just like, oh my God, is that the guy who did the voice for Beast? And they're riffing on it in Sabrina the Teenage Witch? And yes, that is exactly what happened.
I don't remember that, but I used to watch that all the time. There was a couple of years there where I was definitely watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch,
right
like
at the end of season one.
School.
Yeah, right at the end of season one, which would have been like 1997 or something. But it was just one of those things where, like, you'd heard his voice when you were a kid, but I was only 7 or 8 when I was watching the show, and I'd never seen Robbie Benson, the person. And so to see him in a show and hear that voice, I was like, what? Yeah, apparently he's extremely talented, like multi-talented. He's directed, he's composed, he's sung, acted, all these different things. He directed 6 episodes of Friends and a bunch of Ellen, like the Ellen's TV show, Ellen. 25 episodes of Ellen. Fun facts about Robbie Benson that you never knew you needed to know.
Oh, Padar, you always gotta make an entrance.
Oh, what's he doing now? Oh, we have not talked about Stockholm Syndrome yet, but I can pontificate on that for a while if you want.
I mean, we've certainly hinted at it here and here, but this does not seem like the discussion point that I should lead off, so I'll let you go ahead and.
Okay, so I'm going to start off by kind of contextualizing it as, okay, so Stockholm Syndrome came out of this bank robbery in Stockholm in 1973, wherein I think there were 6 captives. They started to sympathize with their captors, and they were captive for 3 days. And they talked to, like, the president of Sweden on the phone, and he was like, yeah, you're not capitulating to their demands. You're like, we would rather let you die. Like, you're going to die at your post rather than us, bailing you out of this situation. And so when the time came for the captives to testify against their captors in trial, they wouldn't do it because they well, there are a lot of reasons why they wouldn't do it. So that kind of leads into the point of Stockholm Syndrome itself is based off of a misunderstanding of an event that happened 40 years ago and has been distilled down into this idea of someone falling in love with or developing feelings for or developing compassion for their captor. And it's a lot more complicated than that because that's not exactly what happened in that case. They didn't like the way the government handled it. They didn't like the way the police handled it. The police put their lives in danger by the way they were dealing with the captors. And it wasn't what people thought it was. And not only that, but in further attempts to study the syndrome throughout the years, they were not really able to nail it down or replicate it or see it happen enough for them to really define it as a thing. It doesn't appear in the diagnostic and statistical manual. It's not a disease. It's not like a mental condition per se. It only happens about 5% of the time in this captor-captive dynamic. So it's extremely rare. It's not well defined. It's not well studied. And it was based on a misunderstanding of the original event. And so to just be like, oh yeah, this is just Belle falling in love with her captor. I'm like, is it though? Because there's a lot of nuance to what happens in the movie that is lost in that interpretation because Belle chooses to replace her father. She seeks him out and makes a conscious decision to take his place, which, there's some problems with that where it's like, you're going to sacrifice your own happiness and your own life for your father. That's the patriarchy talking a little bit. But so there's her conscious choice, and you get them bonding over time, but she doesn't admit her love for him, even probably to herself, until after he lets her go. Mm-hmm. So by the time she admits her love for him, she's technically no longer his prisoner. He says, you must go to him. You are no longer my prisoner. And she also chooses to return to him and to protect him and to spend her life with this beast, or so she thinks. And so technically, he's no longer her captor, so she doesn't technically fall in love with him. She does come to see the humanity in her captor. Like there are some overlapping elements and some things that do line up with the popular media definition of Stockholm Syndrome, but it is one of those things that's more of like a popular media conception than it is like a real psychological phenomenon that's well understood and well documented. So it's kind of one of those funny things where it's like, yes, but no. So yeah, I could probably go on more about that, but I won't. Because we only have 15 minutes left.
Yeah, Tony, because of my former co-host who unfortunately had to drop out of co-hosting all the time with me, basically her big thing was you say the word patriarchy, it's time for everybody to take a drink. So
yeah, it was one of those things that happened enough that it became a drinking game.
Yeah.
So yes, I think that's the first time I dropped the P-bomb in this stream, which is remarkable given the topic at hand.
I know I've really let Amy down by like not saying it more myself. Shame on me, because it's important for me to carry on that tradition.
That legacy. You should just drop it randomly when it doesn't even make sense for you to. Just for the sake of it. Just for the giggles.
I'll be like,
Jess. Good question, Jess. Good question.
Be like, I'll just be randomly doing like, why is the rum gone? Patriarchy.
Yes, like just sprinkle it in, like subliminal messaging, and we'll all just unconsciously, like a Pavlovian response, take a sip of whatever we're drinking when it happens. We're all conditioned now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make sure that we haven't really talked about sort of the last portion of the film after Belle, returns to her father and takes him back. And we did a great musical number when, well, first of all, we get that horrible, like he's a great character, but he's a horrible person from the insane asylum who's basically
Oh, yes.
job it is just to be evil. So you want me to lock Belle's father in the insane asylum unless she agrees to marry you? Oh, that is despicable. I love it.
I love it. Yeah. Again, just the mustache twirliness of that trio there is.
Yeah, and so that builds to like, and this is the part where Gaston is fully revealed, not just as an asshole, but really evil incarnate.
Yeah.
And and then he's got another great musical number. Like he's evil, but hey, he's got great songs.
Yeah.
Just when that one is, let me go ahead. Oh, it's just called the Mob Song.
Yeah.
That's fitting.
And we hate what we don't understand. It's so good. It's so good. Like, it's funny, like, up until, 'cause we watched it as a watch party last year, I think. And until then, I didn't really appreciate the Mob Song for all that it really was. And now it just really stands out a lot more. Oh, you know what I love too, speaking of music and Mob Song, is when they finally break into the castle and all the objects are inanimate, pretending to be things. And then they wake up and start beating the crap out of the townspeople. And the theme changes to a lyricless version that's sped up a little bit of Be Our Guest.
Yes.
And I just find that the most delicious irony of all time.
Which, by the way, we didn't even mention, going back to Be Our Guest, that song was originally intended for when Maurice shows up at the castle. And then obviously it was decided that that was not the right place for it because, I mean, okay, Maurice is a great character, but honestly, you're like,
Is he though?
Does he deserve, like a big musical number like that? That should obviously be focused on Belle,
exactly.
our main protagonist.
She's the one who is going to stay at the castle, and they're really trying to impress her. Like, why would you try to impress this like random middle-aged dude who shows up at your castle?
Well, the idea with that is that what the song represented there was the fact that they were so excited to have somebody to serve, because as the lyrics suggest, they've just been hanging around the castle, not doing anything. They're bored out of their minds. But what it does by changing it to Belle is it's more about them making her feel welcome, which makes the song much stronger, in my opinion. So
I completely agree. Yeah, it just was one of those things where it served Belle so much better than it would have Maurice. I think if they had done it with Maurice, it wouldn't have been that level of comedic theatricality that they achieved with it. It would have been more of like just like one of those peppy, like, hello songs, as opposed to the spectacle that it ended up becoming.
And it's not really a good place for a song like that either, because it's a very, like, when Maurice comes into the castle, it's a very tense scene. And it should be kind of scary. It's like you can't cut to fierce, scary beasts, like growling at him after you've just had this really rambunctious, fun musical number. It's just, I think it would have been much less effective there, and it serves a much greater purpose by moving it to Belle. So,
yeah, I completely agree. But yeah, the Mob Song is just wonderful. It's got that menacing but also energetic quality to it where you feel excited for what's about to happen, but in like a bad way.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like, well, it's not funny. It's like, it's horrible. It's the fact that, you go from the opening song of Belle, where, you know, these are all bright, cheerful townspeople, and then you get to the mob song and they're going to kill one of your main characters. It's like,
yeah, super gruesome.
it's
But it's
just
so
like,
funny at the same, like the lyrics to the song are
the
just so
lyrics are
funny.
great.
Yeah, it's just, we don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us, and this monster is mysterious at least. Bring your guns, bring your knives, save your children and your wives. Will save our village and our lives. Like, come on. Oh, and then my other favorite line is, and 50 Frenchmen can't be wrong. Let's kill the beast. Oh, just the mob mentality is perfectly summed up in that line. 50 Frenchmen can't be wrong.
I mean, again, like, completely relevant.
Totally relevant. Yeah.
Like, and I'm only laughing as I say that because that's all you can do is laugh.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't like bring up the fact that this is also kind of like the gay anthem, right? Like, we fear what we don't understand and all that kind of stuff. It was really Ashman's attempt to like kind of comedically point out how bad this misunderstanding can turn out. Just, when you uncritically fear things that are different and you just go marching in to use violence against the things that you don't like or don't understand. It just, again, you don't understand it. So that you should be trying to understand it instead of turning to violence. And I think that was his ultimate message with that. And it's just perfectly executed.
Yeah, it's like, that was, I really appreciated that at that point in my life. That was something that was really being driven home, this this notion of that it was never, it was very rarely ever said directly, if ever, because that was the sort of time we were living in. But this concept of fearing what you don't understand, which was, such as, lyrics like here, but also in the shows that I was watching as a kid, like, the most obvious example being X-Men, which, was very much, you had lines from Storm that were like, mankind has always feared what it doesn't understand, and all that stuff. And I really appreciate that, even if it kind of had to be coded in that way, it was really drilling those things into my head, so that I was getting that, that wasn't okay, that was an injustice. And so yeah, I really appreciate writers like, Howard Ashman, and and all those people who were, who were trying to really educate the youth. And so
yeah, like you said, he was able to do it in such a way that was like universal. It wasn't about being gay or about being of a particular race. It was about being different in any way, and so it could be relatable to anyone. And like you said, it's a little more coded and subliminal, where hopefully it gets through to kids that, charging in as a mob to something you don't understand is just, it's not the way to do it.
And that's the thing, and this is sort of a side discussion, but it has always struck me as amazing that, like, executives and people like who are in charge of actually putting this stuff out always like are convinced that things are going to go over kids' heads. They're not going to understand and stuff, like, whereas no, you need to be giving kids a lot more credit, because when I would hear stuff like that, whether it was this or again, whether it was X-Men or anything else that was like aimed at kids when I was a kid, like I got it. Like kids are not stupid, and so it was a really great way of communicating these ideas to kids when it couldn't just be said straightforward. So
it's true. And you mentioned X-Men. Well, there's an X-Men character named Beast, and a lot of the early drawings were sort of very similar to his character design. I mean, Fox owned the rights to him at the time, which is a little awkward, but you get that same message, right? Where people are different and you just have to understand and appreciate difference instead of being afraid of it. So yeah, like you said, we got it. And I think those of us who kind of really internalized these, or some hopefully, of these fairy tale messages are maybe more understanding and compassionate for it.
Yeah. That said, they like for every step forward, there was a step back. They, still like we've talked about some of the elements of the story in other Disney films that were a bit problematic at the time and more so upon reflection. But but we did better as we go on. So
that's true. I mean, everyone hails Belle as this like feminist icon, and I'm just like, she reads in like one scene of this, and then all of her interests and desires and all that become subsumed in the stories of the men around her. Like, and the 2017 version is not that much better. They tried to make it like more feminist, but it's really just a veneer. And so I think it's important to point that out and to show kids why this isn't necessarily the most appropriate portrayal of the woman's role. But it doesn't mean you can't enjoy it and love it while it's happening.
I like to think that Belle is going to push Beast to like take her adventuring and and doing that stuff. We haven't seen the end of the story, so it can still be left open to imagination.
I can't remember whether it was last year or this year. They came out with a series called The Queen's Council, which is basically a continuation, like a Disney Hyperion endorsed official continuation. Yeah, 2020. Came out November of last year, which is fitting because the original movie came out November 22nd, 1991. So as of about 5 days ago, 30 years, this movie has been my favorite thing of all time. But yeah, so like recently Disney has started putting out these books. There's definitely also one for Mulan, and I think maybe a few others are either in the works or already existing. I'm not quite sure, but this is a continuation of the story, and I'm only a few chapters in because I ordered it on like Wednesday because I had no idea that it existed. But it starts off with a prologue of the Enchantress, and it sort of gives a little bit more background. Sorry, Jess. I know it's yeah. I get it. Tell it to my back and my work heating pad and home heating pad. Okay.
I did not know about that book, and that sounds like something that I would really want to read now.
You know what? Hopefully, I'll be done it by HereBeCon, and I'll bring it, and you can borrow it.
Okay, good. Because it's so funny. Last night I was like, I'm super proud of me for not spending any money on Black Friday, and now it's the day after, and I'm thinking like, I want to go on Amazon and grab that.
It wasn't expensive. Like if you want to just buy it, I think I spent like $13 on it or something in the paperback. Like it's nothing. But yeah, it's so basically we're in 1789 in France, which if anyone knows anything about French history and off with their heads kind of history, that, Belle and Beast are nobility and they're about to be in a lot of danger. And so it picks up with a prologue of the Enchantress and sort of her mentality of like, they sort of give her prophetic visions being like, you know what, if the Beast doesn't learn these proper lessons, like things are going to go poorly for him when the revolution comes. It sort of like frames her, her putting this spell on him. Yeah. Frames are putting this spell on him as a, like, oh, I'm just trying to protect him from the French Revolution, which is kind of fun. And then in the first chapter, we're in a carriage with Belle and Beast and Lumiere on their way to Paris. And so they're basically going to the court of Versailles, where Beast has a cousin who is still ingratiated with the nobility in France. And they're trying to, hide the fact that he was a monster for 10 years. Be like, oh, I was sick. You know what I mean? And so it starts to fill in some of the backstory and some of the rationale. And it does kind of say that he's going to take her on a tour of Europe, but they have to stop in Versailles first to, make nice with the nobility. But we're on the brink of all this revolution and there's all this upheaval. And so who knows if it's actually going to happen in terms of, the adventuring that she wants to take. But I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm only like chapter. Actually, you know what? I'm literally on chapter 3. So I'll tell you how it goes eventually.
Yeah.
I just thought it was fun.
Like, so funny. Just last thing I need to be doing now is adding more books to my pile, because I'm still like, I was doing really good on getting through the first part of Dune for like a week or two, and now I just kind of stalled again. But it's not because of the book. I'm really enjoying it, but it's just hard to dedicate yourself sitting down and then really getting through stuff. But
I get it. And, I'm the same with adding books to my pile. My best friend recommended to me that I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is also another retelling of the Beauty and the Beast story. And again, I caved and I bought it, and I'm a couple chapters in. And so now I'm reading more books than I can count. I'm really not good at math, so I mean, that doesn't say much. But you get the point where it's like, I was reading other stuff, and then this is how I never finish books, because people recommend stuff to me or people have streams, and I start reading or watching something new. So such is my life.
So since we're pretty much at the end of the stream, I just want to say again, like, I always fall apart with the ending of this when Beast is dying, and and at least I got to see you one last time. And
yeah,
and Ellen mentions music. It's just
I heard this story about Paige O'Hara actually breaking down in tears in the recording booth for this, so much so that when she was done recording the lines, Wise and Truesdale asked her, like, are you okay? And she's like, that she immediately breaks and is like, acting. She's just that good. Paige O'Hara is Belle. She is the living embodiment of Belle, and she's a little bit of my hero. So
yeah, and I know there's a lot said all the time about the fact that, Belle gets, the handsome prince in the end. But like, I have always really liked the touch that it isn't until she looks into his eyes and truly sees that it's Beast behind there that she's like, oh, it is
interested.
you. And,
yeah, that she's interested at all. She's like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
And then the eyes are the window to the soul, and she looks in his eyes and she's like, it is you. Yeah, she reckon. Then it's just so beautiful, like the nuance of that scene where they take their time with it, where she's reticent and she's like, she literally is like, who is this and where did you come from? Because it's just a bunch of fireworks shooting out of hands and feet and jazz hands. Sorry, I was watching a video earlier. I think it was the CinemaSins. Yeah, it was CinemaSins. Everything wrong with the 91 animated Beauty and the Beast. And that was one of the sins was jazz hands. I just thought it was so funny. Yeah, and so just that back and forth of maybe, but it is you. Just you can see the realization on her face as she works through it in her head. And that's like the fact that they did that through animation. And do I understand that reference? I'm not sure.
I understand the reference. I just, even if I've never seen the show, but
I
but
mean,
I know
surface
what it
level.
means.
Yeah,
Yeah.
surface.
And then just once everything starts turning back, and like the way all the characters, turn human again, it's almost like they're popping up, and
Mm-hmm.
and just again the music, and the way that Beast, well, I'm still calling him Beast, but yeah, you know what I mean. The way he just gathers them up, he's like, Lumiere, Cogsworth, Mrs. Potts, and it's
He's
just,
so excited
yeah.
because
And
he's
you
really
get it.
he's opened himself up to them in the last
Yeah,
couple of days or weeks or months or whatever it ends up being in their
yeah,
official timeline. Like, because he had sort of shut everyone out for so long, and then he finally started listening to them again and spending time with them, bonding, I guess. And then he just is so thankful for their role in his rebirth, if you will, that he's so excited to see them, and it's adorable.
because even though you don't actually get to like, you get to see his image in the beginning, but you don't really get, you know uh, to see his actual character in the beginning, but you still have this sense, because of the journey you've gone with him over the film, of how much he's grown. And so you get this feeling that he was probably dismissive towards them beforehand, uh before the curse, but now he's just changed so much that he has such love and affection for all of them, and it's just beautiful. And then the way it just launches into the ballroom scene, and you know reappearance of the dress. you know Again, it's like,
It's all about the dress.
it's all about the dress. And oh, are they gonna live happily ever after, mommy?
I mean,
of
I'm
of
trying to find out.
Of course, my
Of
dear,
course.
of course.
Yeah.
Eh,
That
am I,
reassurance.
am I still gonna have to sleep in the cupboard?
Yes. Am I still gonna have to sleep in the cupboard? Oh man, just there's so many good lines and so many like perfect deliveries in this that it's just like, again, okay, one of my other favorite lines that I just have to pay a quick lip service to. Then again, maybe not.
um I also love the line, "I've been burned by you before."
Just the whole relationship between a candlestick and a feather duster. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Because again, that's like a line for both kids and adults. Like,
And like, oh my god, Plumette is she's such a bombshell when she becomes human that it's just like, okay, this is too much for a kids movie. Like, tone it down. Just the look she gives him is just like,
oh yeah, the way she's moving and the look, and then he's like, oh, ha, ha, ha.
yeah, too much Pepe Le Pew. Maybe dial it back to a little more Maurice Chevalier.
But before, before there's like an X-rated movie happening off screen, Cogsworth shoves him back in the frame.
Oh man. Yeah, Cogsworth and Lumiere are just such perfect additions. Their whole dynamic. I
Hi,
don't
AK.
even. Hi, Kate.
You caught us just at the end. I have tried to communicate to people that you will be back on the channel. In January. Just back me up so that I'm believed.
I'm sure people believe you, John. We don't think you're a liar.
But anyway, so like again, like I mentioned this before, the Alan Menken music that closes out the film, where they bring in the Disney chorus, which is such like, it feels so classic Disney.
Yes.
And the way, again, we mentioned before this shot, which, is is pulled from Sleeping Beauty, which again is why I love this shot so much, because I adore that film and the look of it, and because, and like, I didn't even know that. I mean, I might have heard that at some point, but I'm very glad you said that, Kate, because the shot has always reminded me of Sleeping Beauty, and that's the reason why.
Yeah.
So it really pulled me back into being a little kid again, and that's probably part of why this ending sends like shivers up my spine, because I think it taps into something, from my childhood. Yeah, I mean, this is from my childhood, but you know what I mean? Like when I was a very, very little kid. And so, and just the way the camera pulls out slowly, and the chorus keeps going, and then it pulls out to this, and, it is the, and closes out. It's,
Triumphant.
yeah.
Doesn't even seem like it's enough to describe the moment.
I mean, it is without a doubt one of my favorite movie endings of all time, to say nothing of the film itself. But yeah, I never fail to be completely and utterly moved by it. And
yeah, this movie is so special that when they showed it at the New York Film Festival in September of 1991, like 2 or 3 months before it was supposed to be released, and they only had 70% of the animation complete, it received a standing ovation, like a long, protracted standing ovation from the type of people who would go to the New York Film Festival in 1991. So, for an incomplete animated movie to achieve that level of emotional resonance when it wasn't even done, this movie is just so special on so many levels that it hardly can be captured in words. Like I was telling John before the stream, I made 74 pages of notes for this stream based on watching the movie twice, based on watching YouTube videos about Beauty and the Beast and fairy tales in general, reading articles, and reading these other books where I could see these parallels. And even I watched Shrek again this week because I was reminded, just some pure nostalgia fun, of how much of a fairy tale subversion Shrek is. And I just decided to have a moment of like, yeah, let's just watch this again. Just picking up these things. 74 pages. And I've barely touched on like anything I wrote down in this whole 2 hours. So we could have this discussion for a year and still be going with it, because there's so much that could be talked about with this film. But do I have to do the entire next one in song? Because God, oh my, yeah, no. I I sang a cappella in university for just like a year. And it's funny, speaking of Shrek, I was in a sorority, and every year we had this thing called Song Fest. And one year my sorority did Shrek. And I was typecast as Lord Farquaad.
Oh my God.
And what? I still, yes. I'll show you pictures when we get off. So I still have, I need to lose a couple pounds. The quarantine 15 needs to drop a little bit before I can fit back into it. But I have this like red velvet jacket. I could totally cosplay Gaston with that jacket. And I've got this like white blouse with a black tie. I could cosplay Gaston. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Yeah, so but yes, that it's a thing that happened in my life. But I've dislocated my jaw, and I have other issues that have kiboshed a lot of the singing. So don't expect anything great from me. But yeah, so yeah, don't make me sing the entire next one. That would be taxing and terrible for all of you. So yeah, but this movie is just, it holds such a special place in my heart that I don't even know how to wrap this up because there's so much more I could say. There's so much more I think and feel and love that 2 hours and 15 minutes was not enough to cover. But I'm not going to subject all of you guys to that all night. So maybe hop on Zoom and I'll keep gracing you with my thoughts.
Yeah, I'll just finish off by like, I've seriously like got a pile of just copies of Beauty and the Beast and stuff. Like I showed you guys the one soundtrack I had before, but also this is the Walt Disney Legacy Collection complete soundtrack that has all the score as well. Let's see, I've got right here, and this doesn't even get to the DVDs. These are Blu-rays. Like I've got like 4 different Blu-ray editions of Beauty and the Beast.
Holy moly. I still have my VHS edition, but I'm moving and I don't know where it is. So I tried to find it for this. I really did. I was going to prop it up behind me, but I couldn't find it.
Yeah, I'm heartbroken that I don't have a VHS copy of Beauty and the Beast. It's
oh my
like,
God, I have it and you don't?
yeah, well,
This is a
because
momentous occasion.
well, because at a certain point, with all the movies that I buy, you're like, the old formats have to go at a certain point.
I still have a VHS player. I have no idea if it works. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I
Although
haven't even tried playing VHS.
we were talking about X-Men earlier, and I actually still do have my Pizza Hut edition Creator's Choice VHS tapes that had like there were 3 of them. There was one for the premiere Night of the Sentinels, and then the other 2 were the episodes Enter Magneto and Deadly Reunions. And they had like special Stan Lee interviews before the episodes. So I still have those, and those are never going anywhere.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, there are some things that I literally just can't get myself to part with. This VHS, the Wizard of Oz VHS, never going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that about wraps it up. Although we could just keep going, but I think we need to wrap it up. I'll just go ahead and remind everybody that next week I'll be talking about the Hobbit trilogy, and my guests will be Erin, Kelly, Helen the Clueless Fangirl, Carole Brown, and Dan, Voice of Geekdom. So
I haven't seen any of the Hobbit movies yet, so I have a lot of work to do this week.
Yeah, I think Helen asked if we were doing like a watch along of all the 3 movies.
We haven't done a watch party in so long.
No, I think she was asking if we were doing that for the stream. I'm like,
okay, definitely
no,
not for the stream, but like,
no.
Should we do that this week sometime? Anyone hit me up?
Yeah, like we'd have to plan it immediately because we'd need like 3 separate nights, because I don't think I can talk you guys into doing one long watch party of all 3 films.
I don't know that I literally have time for it. I'll have to like schedule it around some stuff. We'll see how the week pans out. But yeah,
I am dying to hear Erin's reaction, because she is watching the extended cuts for the first time, or she did. She may have already watched them, but there is, I should really say this for next week, but there is this like utterly ridiculous song that the Goblin King sings in the first film. And at a certain point, you just have to shake your head and be like, okay, I'm going with it. But I am so interested to see what she thought of that, because it really is ridiculous.
Speaking of The Hobbit and songs, though, Luke Evans was in The Hobbit as the bard. So.
Like, it's so great, like, in retrospect, to go back and see these actors who were in these parts, because especially after I've been watching the show Foundation, to go back now and see Lee Pace as Thranduil, like, he is just awesome. He plays that type of role so well. And when I was like, he's basically like in Foundation, he's the worst aspect of Thranduil in that, because he's like, I mean, not all the time, because he's actually playing like different characters with basically the same face. But certain versions of that character are just like the absolute worst. So, so it's great, and I can't wait to go back and watch these movies. And I know, speaking, we were talking about thirst earlier. Helen will not be stopped on this stream with the Lee Pace thirst.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of like I haven't seen the movies, but I've seen so many of the like stills from the movies, and some of the actors and it's just like, yeah, that's the stuff. So it'll be fun. But you know what? I had so much fun watching the Lord. Okay, for those of you who don't know, I hadn't seen all of the Lord of the Rings movies up until last fall when I watched them with these people in watch parties. I'd seen the first one with my best friend just after it came out when I was like 12 or 13. I must have been, I don't know. Yeah, around that age. And I didn't get it at the time. And now I understand it a lot better. And having people, feeding me the information and the trivia and the fun facts and the love constantly through watching them all was just like such a delightful experience. And so I kind of do want to have these watch parties again with you guys because it just adds to the experience of watching them for the first time and that experience of, I mean, I know they're not as beloved as the Lord of the Rings films, but the extra love that comes with the watch parties for these things.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I am going to have things, that I'm going to be, in some cases, very critical of when we have our discussions, but that doesn't mean that, like, I've got a love for, if not every part of these films, then at least for all the people who made them. And so even the stuff that I'm like, oh, they could have done that better, it still works out to having great affection for all the hard work that they put into it. So so even the stuff that I'm going to criticize next weekend, it's going to be still done with, all the love in the world, because, for the people who made Lord of the Rings, like, you don't have to get it right 100% of the time for me to still, love them. So
fair enough.
So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So that'll be next Saturday. Tomorrow over on Here Be Dragons, you can catch us, Stephen, Nessie, and I, along with special guest Sasuke, talking about the first season of What We Do in the Shadows, which is just going to be an absolutely hilarious, fun time. So I can't wait for that.
So jazzed for this. I love that show. I didn't expect to, but I did.
And once again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, just go ahead and click on, wrong way. There's a thing in the corner, a logo. Yeah, we can't see it, but it's on the YouTube channel. Just go ahead and click on that and subscribe. And Tony, Here Be Dragons is on YouTube. If let me see, I can probably post the link right now. Let me go ahead and put that in there. I don't know if that comes up as a clickable link or not, but if it does, just click on that. Yep, this was the channel that Stephen graciously invited me to take part in long before I had my own. So, like, if you like anything that I'm doing, you will love what we're doing over on Here Be Dragons, because he did it first and he does it better. So, but yeah, I guess we're all wrapped up. Did you have anything you wanted to say in closing, Kate?
I just wanted to thank you for letting me be your guest.
And we are gonna, like, I'm obviously gonna have you on for the next Disney thing, but we also need to find like some other stuff that that's not Marvel that we share.
These are my like current hyper fixations that are things I know anything about is Marvel and fairy tales. Apparently,
Which I can't even really say that anymore because like Marvel Studios is bringing back, X-Men the
X-Men
animated
97.
series. So like I'm totally in on Marvel Studios now, even if I may not like all of their stuff, but like because of that alone, um, I owe them my allegiance as one elf, has said.
Step
So
into our web.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll find something else that we can agree on as an appropriate. Oh, Legally Blonde. Call Mary, and
It's so funny because after we initially talked about that, I did buy it for a very low price on iTunes. So it's in my library. I just haven't watched it yet. So
I feel like there was this one moment where we almost watched it together at like 4 a.m.
and then I
Like
was like,
virtually watched
no,
it together.
no, damn it, Kate, I've got to go to bed.
Yeah, and then you actually did, and I watched like half of it without you. And then I fell asleep too at like 5 a.m. But welcome to the pandemic middle of the night movie watch parties that we had.
Yeah.
Anyways, it's
Okay.
been like 2.5 hours. Let's let these lovely people return to their lives.
Okay. So we're wrapping. Still, this is not bad compared to what I have done. Like next week we'll be lucky if we wrap up in under 4 hours. Let's just be honest.
Given the size of the panel and the scope of the discussion, I'm gonna strap in for like 5 hours. Let's be real. I'll be like prepped with snacks and not block anything else for that evening.
Yeah. All right. So with that, I will say good night to you lovely people. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you especially for our new viewers, and and I'm so excited, and Tawny, if we're going to see you in Slack, I hope we will. And yeah, I hope you all have a great night, and hopefully we'll see you tomorrow over on Here Be Dragons.
Bonsoir, merci, au revoir, à bientôt.
Alors.
Hello.